This video is made possible thanks to InVideo AI. More details coming up soon. Let's be clear, Scandinavian countries have a problem, and a serious problem whose origin is in one very specific country, Sweden. Pay attention to this headline.
How Swedish gangs are exporting young contract killers across Scandinavia.
This is something that probably wouldn't surprise you so much if we were talking about a country in Africa or even Latin America instead of Sweden. But no, we're talking about a Scandinavian country traditionally known for its welfare state and high standard of living. This is a topic we've already talked about in a past video on VisualPolitik. Sweden has become one of the most dangerous places in Europe. In this country, organized crime at the hands of foreign gangs is totally out of control. And so, little by little, Sweden has become the country everyone looks to in order not to end up like it. Because the truth is that by European standards, their figures are outrageous. Sweden is already the leading European power in terms of numbers of rape, gang warfare, shootings, and gun murders after Albania. Thus, Stockholm has a rate of firearm deaths about 30 times higher than London, and nationally, Sweden has the highest rate in all of Europe. In 2023, a total of 55 people were shot to death in 363 separate shootings, and this happened in a country of only 10 million people, historically known for just the opposite, for safety. But these days, the situation is only getting worse. In just 2 years, between 2021 and 2023, shootings increased by more than 8%. The police themselves say they are overwhelmed and aren't sure how to deal with this very negative trend. And that's not even all. Sweden is also the country that records the most explosions each year without being at war. In 2023, there were 149 explosive attacks in the country, which was its all-time record. And let me stress, these figures may seem small if we compare them with those we usually see in the United States or in some Latin American countries. But in Europe, they are really ridiculous. But that's not even the end of it. It gets even worse when we take a look at who exactly is responsible for the vast majority of these violent crimes. We're talking about extremely dangerous, organized crime gangs. Gangs dedicated to drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, and all the worst behavior you can imagine. In Sweden itself, the former Scandinavian social democratic paradise that is fast becoming a continental crime epicenter. But who are these criminals really, and why is the whole situation so concerning? Well, in the press, you'll often read that a Swede has done this or that. And it's true. Technically, they are Swedish. But since the devil is in the details, we took a look at the government's own official statistics, and what we found is that the story is not exactly as it is being told. The reality is that almost 90% of those sentenced to prison for these types of crimes are foreign-born or second-generation immigrants. I repeat, we're talking about almost 90% of all those convicted. It's madness, which logically tells us that there's a serious problem of integration and management of migratory flows, something that other countries need to look at in order not to make the same mistakes. And do you know what the worst thing is? That while for many years organized crime in Sweden was a problem only for Swedes, now it's jumping the borders to its neighboring countries. Yes, that's right, Sweden has become an exporter of crime and violence in the region, which understandably is causing enormous anger. Check it out.
It reflects a completely sick, depraved culture of violence that something like this could take place in Sweden and grow into a phenomenon. We don't want that in Denmark.
What you've just heard was said last August by the Minister of Justice of Denmark, a social democratic minister to boot. We aren't talking about some outburst from a politician that you could label as extreme right or anything like that. Can you imagine how embarrassing it must be to have a minister from your neighboring country say that you live in a place with a depraved culture? Something very serious has to be going on. So in this video, we'll answer several questions. How is the violence spreading from Sweden to the rest of the Nordic countries? What are countries like Denmark, Finland, and Norway doing to protect themselves from the criminals coming from Sweden? Are we already looking at a security problem at the European level? Well, in this video, we're going to tell you all the details. But before, as someone who's been creating YouTube videos for absolutely years, I can tell you that a lot happens behind the scenes. Recently, we discovered a tool that has transformed how we make videos, InVideo AI, soon launching its newest version, InVideo AI V3. InVideo AI V3 isn't just any update. It comes with powerful generative capabilities, allowing you to create full-length videos from scratch using simple text prompts, whether it's telling a captivating story, making an educational video, or creating imaginative and stunning visuals. The possibilities are endless. InVideo AI V3 puts you in the director's seat, letting you bring any idea to life. Let me show you an example of what it can do. Simply ask InVideo to create a 1-minute video of the story of a robot in a cyberpunk setting that wants to escape the Matrix.
In the neon-lit labyrinth of Neo-Tokyo, a city where the line between man and machine...
But it doesn't stop there. InVideo AI V3's generative media can create anything you can think of, from dramatic storylines to product ads, educational content, and more. Unlike other tools, InVideo AI V3 is launching within just a few weeks for everyone to use, with features like voice cloning to narrate videos in your voice. InVideo AI V3 truly stands out as the ultimate video creation tool. And here's the best part. By using the link in the description, pinned comment, or scanning the QR code, you can try InVideo AI V2 for free and create up to 4 videos with a watermark. To unlock the full potential, it's just $20 a month. Use our exclusive code VisualPolitik50 to double your video creation credits in the first month.
Exporting criminals.
What we're going to tell you now is not an American action movie. It's what's been happening in previously sleepy Denmark. On July 24th, a Swedish youth of only 16 years old opened fire with a Glock pistol and started shooting in Copenhagen's Blågård Square. Fortunately, in this case, there were no injuries. Just 1 week later, on the 31st of July, another 17-year-old Swedish youth opened fire in the town of Kolding. A few days later, another, yet again, Swedish youth, also aged 17, fired 6 shots with a semi-automatic weapon, wounding another 18-year-old in the leg. It happened in the Frederiksberg district of the Danish capital. And we're not even done. On Tuesday the 6th of August, 2 Swedish nationals blew up a kiosk in Copenhagen with explosives. And so, on a case-by-case basis, Denmark added 25 such criminal acts and attempts by Swedish nationals between April and August 2024 alone. And take note, this in itself already surpasses all similar cases of the previous year, 2023.
It's very concerning that this can happen, and very concerning that it's now happening in Denmark.
And of course, with all that we are telling you, many of you will be asking the following question. What on earth is going on? Why are teenagers traveling from Sweden to Denmark to shoot people and explode bombs? Well, according to the Swedish and Danish authorities, we are witnessing a new criminal phenomenon. Sweden's so-called child soldiers. Tens, hundreds of young Swedes of immigrant origin from ghettoized neighborhoods, from the so-called Swedish parallel societies, have become true pawns of crime. There's even a more or less established price list for each of the different services. What do you need to shoot someone in the leg as a warning? Well, that's about $5,000. If the objective is to explode a business with grenades or homemade explosives, such as the Copenhagen kiosk that we mentioned before, then in that case the price is about $7,000. What if you need to go further and need a definitive solution? Well, that would set you back anywhere from $8,000 at the lowest end to over $50,000. Terrible. And so, on Telegram, young Swedish nationals who are attracted by this kind of easy money use emojis to avoid being detected by the algorithms. An apple instead of a grenade, and a water gun for the final solution. VisualPolitik community, we're talking about a problem that's only growing and is extremely difficult to monitor. According to Swedish police, hold on to your seat, at least 93 children under the age of 15 are suspected of planning and committing murders. And take note, because at least 700 would-be criminals for hire have been detected. Crazy. As you can see from the graph, Swedish nationals who commit crimes with firearms are getting younger and younger. And the situation is only getting worse. Among other reasons, because the very laws that protect minors with more procedural guarantees are also causing gang leaders to prefer younger kids to carry out their plans. So we're talking about a growing army of teenagers with guns and grenades. As I told you, it's crazy. Well, all this export of Swedish crime to countries like Denmark that we're seeing has mostly to do with a gang war that has escalated in the last year. Basically, we have a large Swedish gang fighting a Danish gang who are fighting to maintain control of the narcotics trade between the two countries. This is turning into a nightmare for the Danes, who are certainly not used to a situation like this, and the worst is yet to come. Why? Because foreign gangs are recruiting more and more soldiers. In Denmark itself, for instance, it's estimated that there are already at least 1,500 gang members, while in Sweden, with less than twice the population, there are about 14,000.
Sweden says rooting out gangs will take a decade.
And do you know what the worst thing is? Well, Swedish crime is not only spreading to Denmark, its other neighbours, Finland and Norway, also have every reason to be concerned.
It is serious. We are afraid that the development we have seen in Sweden will infect us.
Although the level of contagion has not yet reached the level being recorded in Denmark, the Norwegian government says that Swedish criminal networks are already operating throughout the country. So, with all that we are telling you, I'm sure many of you are wondering, okay, and what the hell are governments doing to stop all this? Are there any measures already on the table? Well, yes, there are. What's more, what we're going to tell you now is sure to surprise many of you. Pay attention.
We don't want them here.
The Nordic countries are searching like mad for a solution to all the problems we've just told you about, and they're doing it both within their own countries and through international agreements. Let's start with the second one because there's a lot to talk about. Check out this new story.
Denmark considers introducing border controls with Sweden following recent shootings.
The police have started to increase their inspections on trains crossing the Øresund Bridge. That's the bridge connecting Copenhagen with Malmö, Sweden's third largest city. Many more cameras and other reconnaissance devices are also being installed on the border with Sweden. But that's not all. On top of that, the Nordic countries have reached an agreement. From now on, there will be a lot more Danish, Finnish, and Norwegian police operating alongside the Swedish police within Sweden itself.
Denmark and Sweden police operate across borders to tackle gang crime spree.
And if these measures don't work in the short term, the land that brought us Lego is even considering suspending the application of the Schengen Treaty and implementing full border controls with its northern neighbour. But take note, because this is not even the most striking thing. Sweden and Finland have begun to enable their police forces to carry out operations in border municipalities inside the neighbouring country. They've even announced a new law to allow officers to intervene within the other country in situations involving immediate danger, without the Swedish and Finnish police having to apply for permission in advance. To make this possible, Sweden has announced that it will regulate the entry of Finnish police weapons into the country, and that it will recognise certain powers of the neighbouring country's agents when operating on Swedish territory. This could certainly make things much more difficult for criminals, but we wouldn't be telling you the whole story if we missed the most important thing: what the Scandinavians are doing within their own countries. You know what they say? Problems at home are solved at home. Well, in order to nip the problems of integration of foreigners in the country in the bud, and as a result, the crime emerging in the growing ghettoization that many cities in the country have suffered, Sweden has been implementing clear anti-immigration measures for some years now. This is a huge paradigm shift. Because VisualPolitik community, the land of IKEA, Volvo, and H&M, as you well know, has until very recently been one of the most flexible with the arrival of immigrants from all over the world. In fact, take a look at this graph. During the wave of refugees that swept through Europe in the middle of the last decade, Sweden opened wide its doors to hundreds of thousands of people who arrived in just a few years. Since the beginning of this century, a whopping 2 million foreigners have arrived in the country. As a result, 20% of the country's current population was not born in Sweden. In 2015 alone, Sweden added 160,000 refugees from countries such as Syria, Afghanistan, and Somalia. Well, the fact is that since that total open door policy and that wave of migration, by chance or by consequence, the problems of delinquency and crime have only worsened. And now, the Conservative government of Ulf Kristersson wants to try to reverse that situation. How does he hope to do it? Well, take a look at this bill.
Sweden's snitch law proposal faces backlash from public sector workers.
The so-called whistleblower or snitch law is one of the measures that were included in the government agreement between the Moderate Party and the Sweden Democrats when forming a government in 2022. Now, what does this law consist of, and why do they call it that? The idea is to force about 1 million workers, mostly public workers such as doctors and teachers, to report any contact with undocumented patients or students. In this way, the Swedish government intends to increase the number of expulsion orders for people who are illegally living in the country. Right now, there is a committee appointed by the government to draft this law, and it's expected that the text could be ready by November. The fact is that if it were to be approved, thousands of illegal immigrants would have to be denounced by public sector workers. Of course, as you can imagine, this has caused quite a stir, as many of these workers refuse to participate in these snitches, or tip-offs. And not only that, the risk is that many illegal immigrants will decide to stop going to the doctor or stop sending their children to school, which could further increase the problem of exclusion if they still decide to stay living in the country, which is the most likely scenario. Nevertheless, this isn't the only thing Sweden wants to do to try to tackle its huge integration and security problems. The Swedish government also announced a few weeks ago that it will pay up to $34,000 to legal immigrants to voluntarily leave the country starting in 2026. This massive foreign departure subsidy program already existed, but what has just been announced means that Sweden will become the European country that will pay the most for programs like this by far. In this way, the government believes that hundreds of thousands of long-term unemployed or very low-income immigrants could choose to take the money, pack their bags, and leave the country. I repeat, we're talking about $34,000. But keep in mind, many say the Swedish state would actually save a fortune in subsidies and government assistance to people who are contributing little or nothing to its elephantine welfare state. All these are incredible steps in the opposite direction to what Sweden has been doing for decades. But what if I told you that the country that brought us ABBA is nothing more than an amateur? Yeah, that's right. Because in the closing of its doors to migration, there is one country that stands out in particular, and not only at the Nordic level, but at the European level. We are, of course, talking about Denmark. We already told you in a past video how Denmark has become an anti-immigration stronghold, even though it's been governed by the Social Democrats for years. Their anti-immigration policies are basically a gigantic political consensus, and as we've already told you, the Danes have taken measures that some of you may find crazy.
Denmark targets zero net migration as tough border policies see asylum numbers cut in half.
We're talking about the toughest immigration and asylum laws in all of Europe. In fact, for several years now, with the exception of Ukrainians, the country has not accepted a single refugee arriving on their own. Only those arriving through UN agencies are accepted. What's more, we mentioned the Swedish snitch law before. Denmark also has another one of its own, the jewelry law. According to this law, asylum seekers arriving in the country have to hand over their personal valuables, such as jewelry and gold, to the Danish authorities. They're only allowed to keep the ones with the highest sentimental value, but that's as far as it goes. The reason? Well, on paper, the Danish government says that this is a way to pay for the costs of their being in the country, but in reality, they're pursuing something quite different. Denmark's harsh laws are primarily intended to discourage immigrants and refugees from choosing to settle in their country. After all, there are plenty of others in Europe with friendlier conditions for immigrants, so why on earth go to Denmark? But that's not all. To prevent the creation of parallel societies where crime is rampant, as in Sweden, the Danes have started to tear down public housing, or to sell it to investors to renovate and sell at market prices. The idea is to eliminate public housing in neighborhoods where more than 40% of the total supply is public, and where a number of other conditions are met, including more than 50% non-Western population. For the moment, these measures seem to be working, and although 2024 is proving to be a dark year for crime in the country, let's not forget one thing. Those who are operating in Denmark are mostly young people of Swedish nationality and Arab origin who live in Sweden, and who, as we said before, cross the border to commit crimes for hire. The problem then is not so much those in Denmark who are settled, but those exported by Sweden. And that's why, as we've told you in this video, the governments of the countries around Sweden are demanding much tougher measures to control the problem they have at home. After all, it's no longer just a Swedish problem, but, as we say, it's becoming a headache for the surrounding countries. VisualPolitik viewers, there's no doubt that the situation is red hot, and perhaps things will only get worse. As always, we'll be watching closely. But for now, it's your turn. What do you think Sweden would have to do to stop being an exporter of crime? Do you think a Swedish crime wave will spread to the surrounding countries? What do you think is the model for tackling all these problems? Well, leave us your comments below and let's start a debate. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And of course, you can activate the notification bell so you don't miss any news. As always, thank you very much for watching. All the best. We'll see you next time.